hang on, just give me one sec. Let me do your little Iva intro for you. So,
Okay, all right.
joining us today is Tom O'Neil, an award-winning investigative journalist, author, and editor whose work has appeared in publications such as Us, Premiere, The Village Voice, and many others. Tom recently released his book Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Anytime, Beau.
So really quickly, we don't need to get into like every crush you've ever had or
Mm,
anything like that, but just, for people who don't know you as well as I do, what are the
mm.
major plot points of Tom O'Neil?
Me
Where
as
you
well.
where are you
Oh,
from? How'd you get
oh,
into
oh.
writing, all that?
I'm from Philadelphia originally, born in northern Jersey, raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Went to college at McAllister in St. Paul, Minnesota for a couple of years, transferred to NYU, got a film degree. Never planned
Nice.
on becoming a reporter or writer or journalist or anything like that. But kind of was doing a side. I wanted to be a playwright and a screenwriter, and I was working as a horse and carriage driver in Central Park.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I had a lot of downtime uh, on the slow days, so I just started writing stuff.
Was that while you were at school or after you
No, I'd
graduated?
finished school
Okay.
and didn't want to work in a restaurant. While I was writing plays, and I needed some income. And a friend of mine, a friend of a friend, was a carriage driver. I'd never even been near a horse in my life,
Right.
and they trained me, and I did it off and on for 8 years.
Wow.
And the first year or two,
8 years.
yeah.
I had no idea you were doing that.
What do your parents talk to you about, Beau? They never told you their friend.
They just tell me to do my homework. They don't tell me things. I don't.
Tell them to tell you stories about their interesting friends' past lives. But yeah,
Well,
and I started writing stuff while I was reading magazines in the downtime. And I submitted one story, let me turn this off, to the New York magazine that I had written in the first person, just on a lark, and they published it in the next issue.
wow.
And that kind of turned into a slow drip of work. And I started submitting stuff to them. They were publishing it. I tried New York Daily News. I got a kind of semi-regular job doing Sunday feature stories for them.
Okay.
My first national piece, when I was visiting your father and mother in LA, and got bothered by a lot of people who mistook me for Brad Pitt or Oliver Stone actor. And then
Yeah.
I wrote a story about how horrible that was and got it published in a national magazine. And then all of a sudden I was making money that allowed me to stop driving the horse mostly.
Nice. So what year did you move out here?
And I came out here after about 20 years in New York. I moved to Venice for what I thought was going to be 2 years in 97. But at the end
Okay.
of 2 years, I got an assignment in 99 to do a story that was supposed to be about what was then going to be the 30th anniversary of the occurrence of the Manson murders.
Right.
Supposed to be a 3-month job, and it turned into a 20-year debacle. And
Right.
but the book came out, and I ended up staying here a lot longer than I had originally planned.
Yeah.
The book, and now the book's done and out, and trying to decide what to do next.
So, and I want to talk about all of that, and I have questions about all of that, but really quick, the first two episodes of my podcast have been about basketball. This one is not going to be, but I have to throw in, to embarrass you, three really quick Philadelphia basketball related questions.
Yeah, but I mean, I have nothing to be embarrassed about because we're the greatest athletic teams in the world, and I'm
So,
a
okay,
basketball player in high school and grade
you
school.
were.
You
So
probably never heard about that.
no, no, I did not. All right, so then you got nothing to fear. For
No,
I only got three questions. Question number one: who is the all-time leading scorer for the 76ers?
Julius Irving.
Incorrect.
I actually don't follow it. I just playing it.
I know. I actually thought it was Julius Irving too. It's Hal Greer.
I remember Hal Greer, the 1960s. He played for the 76ers with Wilt Chamberlain.
Yep.
Uh, I paid attention more then. I was a real little kid, but that's when pro sports were fun.
Who is the mascot for the Philadelphia 76ers?
The Fanatic.
It's Franklin the dog.
Since when? Not when I was a kid.
I didn't know that until I looked it up. I realized I had no idea who the mascot was for
Why don't
the
you do some collegiate Philadelphia basketball? Villanova University. I can answer any question about
anything about Villanova.
NCAA national champions.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I don't have anything prepared for Villanova. I do, however, for my final question. This is kind of a softball, but it also might not be if you don't follow it. Who is the starting point guard for the 76ers?
Now?
Yeah.
Allen Iverson. I don't pay attention. I got to figure out why the Manson murders happen. I can't follow a bunch of guys going back and forth on a court, throwing a ball in a hoop, even though they're the best team in the nation.
Well, they're pretty good, and you make a good point.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. For those who haven't read the book, I've read the book. I read it in about a week. It's my favorite book I've read in my adult life. For those who haven't really read it, what's kind of the general idea? You mentioned, I think it's important, the whole kind of aspect of the amount of time it took to write it. So if
well, I mean, the basis of the book is me looking at the case with fresh eyes and assessing information that wasn't available to other journalists or researchers or reporters at the time. That, that's why it took 20 years. It wasn't easy to get. And then trying to figure out what it all meant when I uncovered so many contrary accounts, and then able to show that the prosecutor and the police had hidden very important information and had their key witnesses commit perjury on the stand. And then it also became a story about journalism and how I chased the story and how it impacted my life. And I try not to get too much into my personal life, but it is told in the first person.
Yeah.
Almost entirely chronologically. So you kind of followed me through the 20 years of chasing this kind of big, great white whale that I'm trying to, capture and report. And then the end has a lot of open areas that there's unanswered. So I'm hoping that either I'll do a follow-up or other people, like maybe young journalism students, will do the reporting that I kind of gave up on.
Well, you didn't give up. Reading the book, when you get to the end there, it's just frustrating because, for the people listening who can't really see what I'm seeing behind you right now, what made this, there were two things that made the book stand out for me. One was what you just talked about, how, you don't really talk about your personal life in the book, but it's also definitely a narrative. And that just makes it so much more interesting than just a story about Charles Manson. But also when it gets into stuff like this, I think there's a whole lot of room for conspiracy theorists, and that makes it, just the topic, it kind of turns some people off. But there, behind you, I can see there's just tons of research. And so
that's just a fraction of it too.
Really? Because you talk
around and
You talked about going to like UCLA archives to have to get different, information. What was it like trying to go through all of that? Like having all this information that you've collected over 20 years and try to like just write it. And
not easy. I mean, I got a collaborator in 2017, the last couple of years, and without his help, he and I figured out how to present the material, and I was overwhelmed. Right, I just couldn't. I kind of lost the forest for the trees, or the trees for the forest, whatever that saying is. And he and I basically put together an outline and a structure, and wrote it together. And at that point, it was like having a gift from God sent to
right.
him. He was great too. So. I mean, I still have so many little areas of research that I thought it was all going to end when the book came out, but it hasn't. I get emails every single day with people who have information, and 90% of them are nuts, but 10% of them aren't.
Right.
I just can't close the email and forget about it. I say I'm going to, but then the next thing you know, a couple hours later, I'm looking stuff up, and then I lose another week.
Right.
Figure out what to do with it.
How do you, as like an investigator and a journalist, how first, what's the process of determining if like information you're getting is factual?
Yeah. Well,
And
that was the
then,
less. Oh, sorry.
sorry, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that was so much of what I did is self-taught. I never went to journalism school. Never. I think I took a journalism class junior year in high school. Might have covered sports. I can't even remember. But
Right.
um, uh, for this in particular, I was interviewing people about a case that was already 30 years old. And in the first few months of it, I got really excited anytime somebody told me something different, or new.
Hmm.
And then after a while, I started realizing that there's a couple factors at play. Number one, people conflate information from so long ago with other information that they didn't necessarily experience, but they might have read in news accounts or books. And I don't think they do it deliberately.
Right. It's just memories get mixed.
Yeah, and a
Yeah.
lot of people have just really lousy memories, myself included. So once I figured that out, I learned that lesson. That was the most important lesson I think I learned, that no matter how dramatic something was that I learned from somebody in an oral interview, if I couldn't back it up with documentary evidence from case files, that's why I ended up going to all these archives for years all over the country, in California especially. If I couldn't back it up, I wouldn't put it in. Or if I couldn't get it from a second and third hand source in an interview,
Hmm.
sources, I wouldn't use it. So, I mean, there's so much stuff that didn't end up in the book because it wouldn't pass those litmus tests.
Right. And that's got to be frustrating because you
Oh, yeah.
have all this
Yeah.
stuff that's like, it's right here, but I can't.
Yeah. I mean, there are still books up there in the furthest corner of the shelves that represent like 3, 4, 5 months of research, but
Yeah.
didn't pan out in the end. And I never threw anything away. I just filed it in a binder, put it way up there.
Right.
It might come back into play later, but I can't use it. But that's 3 or 4 wasted months of your life, and that's how this book kind of
Yeah.
20 years.
That's got to be frustrating.
Yeah.
As so, as a journalism student myself now, and uh, investigative journalism to me has always been kind of the most interesting and important type of journalism, but it also seems like by far the hardest. How do
Hmm.
you, for students or people who are just entering the field, like how do you like start a story? If like I know you were given the assignment and you talk about it in your book, but if you could just give like what does that process look like of, okay, this is the question, but
Yeah.
how do you even define the question, I
Well, back
guess?
then in 99, when I got this assignment, I was an entertainment reporter for about 10 years. But for the last 3 years of those 10 years, I was doing mostly investigative reporting about the entertainment industry. So for those stories, I did about a dozen of them
Hmm.
over 2 or 3 years. They were usually angles that I discovered on my own, sexism at Saturday Night Live, um, stuff that went on behind the scenes in daytime talk shows that was really horrible to the guests that they were putting on these shows.
Right.
I found that out through just listening and being aware. But for this Manson story, there was no angle. And if whoever hears this reads the book, they'll see in the first chapter that was the hardest thing. The magazine said the 30th anniversary of this famous case is coming up. We wanted to do a feature story on it.
Right.
I said, but what's there to say? It's the most overreported story, of the last 50 years, except for the Kennedy assassination, a couple others, OJ and stuff. But I said,
Right.
been so many books and so many articles, and my editor, who I'd worked with a long time, said, you'll find an angle. And I said, well, I'm not interested. I've never even read the book Helter Skelter. I've never really paid any attention, but I needed money and I needed the job. So I also wanted to please her because she and I had had a really good track record and I'd never let her down.
Hmm.
I reluctantly took it on. And then what I did was I read the book, kind of the Bible of the case, Helter
Right. Helter Skelter.
Prosecutor. And there were holes, there were evident holes in that. Even he admitted he couldn't fill. There were things he could never figure out. And once I started looking into that stuff really hard and trying to get access to first people and then documents that might have explained those holes, then it became something much larger than I'd envisioned, the magazine had envisioned, and turned into this whole book about corruption and law.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of, you don't like a story that doesn't already have an angle because you can go in 10 different directions before you figure it out. But like, I'm always, if you read the newspaper every day, nobody reads the newspaper. If you pay attention,
Yeah.
there's always something that, whatever you're interested in that you want to know more about, there's the beginning of the story.
And couldn't have segued better myself kind of into, so with everything going on right now, with the virus and now the protests and everything. Well, first off, let me backtrack to the virus. I noticed that I don't know if it still is, but your hardcover of the book had completely sold out. Was that because of the virus on Amazon or?
No, I wish. I mean, I don't wish. That sounded
Okay.
No, what happened was I did Joe Rogan's podcast.
Uh-huh.
And we had done, the hardcover came out almost a year ago in June, late June of 2019. And we did, okay sales, got pretty decent reviews. It wasn't a failure. It wasn't a big success. It was kind of middle.
Mm-hmm.
I did this guy's podcast, and I've heard of him, but I've never seen his podcast or paid attention.
Right.
Knew going in, because once I found out that he was interested and looked into who he was, that it was a game changer.
Yeah.
Did the podcast in April, like the second week of April. Everything changed a week before I did it, just when he announced that I was going to do it. And then he talked about the book on a podcast with another guest a week before I was booked. And that night, everything kind of went crazy in my social media stuff, because I did sites for the book. And I'm like, what's going on here? Because I didn't know we'd been negotiating my going on, but I didn't know he'd announced it or talked about it. And then the next day, you couldn't get a hardcover of the book in the United States or in the United Kingdom. And the paperback had just been released in the United Kingdom like 3 weeks before that was out. But because of the virus, I mean, it was kind of so typical of this whole journey. All of a sudden, there was this massive demand for the book, and they couldn't fill it because they couldn't replenish the stocks at Amazon.
Wow.
Because it wasn't an essential item. I thought it was. They didn't.
Yeah.
and the bookstores are closed. So
right.
Books, they were the only thing you could get. And
is there an audiobook version?
Yeah. And I'm not very happy with the guy that read it.
No? Okay.
He's good. He's good at what he does, but it's the first time I've ever done this.
Yeah. Well, it also must be weird hearing someone else, telling your story, because it's your voice, but so. I
should have talked to the guy, even if he's in New York, even if I couldn't meet him face to face, if I talked to him on the phone for a couple hours, gotten my sensibility, my nuance, it sounds like a completely different character narrating my book.
Right.
Couldn't even listen to the prologue because I got sick to my stomach. And they had asked me to do it. And my agent's like, don't do it. He goes, you're too much of a perfectionist. You'll be trying to change the words.
Right.
You can't do that because the thing's going to already be at the plant, and you'll lose your mind. And he knows me as well as anyone. He's been my agent for 20 years.
Yeah.
So, but I should have been much more involved in picking the person. So the audio book has been on the New York Times They only do a monthly bestseller list for audio.
Mm-hmm.
April and May, it's been the 7th best-selling nonfiction book. I'm either one behind or one ahead of Michelle Obama. I can't remember, so that feels good.
That's good company.
Yeah, and then the paperback comes out in
June 23rd.
Yeah, and they doubled the amount that they're going to print because of the demand.
That's awesome.
I don't want to jinx it, but they're pretty excited about how that'll do, when it comes out.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to do great. I love the book. For people listening, they now know that on June 23rd, the book comes out for paperback on Amazon. The audiobook's out hardcovers out. Where can people kind of follow you and what's going on with you and the book?
Oh, yeah. So I have an Instagram page for the book, um, which is called, I think, Chaos the Book or Chaos Manson. If you just Google Tom O'Neill and Chaos Manson,
Sure,
and
I'll pull it up right here.
yeah,
Um, and then you've mentioned a few times maybe following up with the book, or
yeah.
is there an idea for kind of what's next? Would you probably wouldn't, is there any desire to like start some new, like you brought up OJ or anything, like is there any desire to bring up another old case, or
I
something?
love actually looking at kind of historical narratives and seeing what's wrong with them.
Right.
I just don't know whether I'm ready to dive into that again,
Right.
my life into it. I've told my collaborator, Dan, I said, I'll do anything like that only if he does it with me again.
Hmm.
Do it alone. It's just too hard and lonely. And he said he would, but he's a hotshot young writer who's getting asked by other people to do their books. So we'll see what happens. But I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to decide what to do. I'd love to do a documentary film, but I sold the rights to the scripted to Amazon movie people. So I'm not allowed to do a documentary, unfortunately, until they've done their movie. If they do it, it's being developed, and we'll
Right.
how that goes. So
It can take a minute.
happen.
Yeah. I had no idea you had sold the rights for the picture.
They actually, Amazon Studios bought the movie rights before Dan and I even started writing the book. I mean, I had written
Wow.
the book, and there was a proposal out there, and they somehow got a hold of it. And we
Yeah.
sold it to Little Brown in 2017, and they said they wouldn't tell us how they got it, and I didn't want to push them, although I was pretty pissed off because no one's supposed to see it but the publisher.
Yeah.
But they went to my agent and made a really generous offer, and I was still broke and in debt and still kind of just getting over 2 lawsuits.
Right.
I had to take the money, but I had to sign away podcast. Well, I might be able to do a podcast that might be in the works, but I'm not allowed to do a documentary and compete with whatever it is they're doing.
Right.
That all came together in 2017, even before Tarantino announced his movie project. In fact,
Well,
announced that he was doing the movie. It was like a month or two after we had kind of finalized.
yeah.
In the middle of 2017, and I thought, oh, now they're going to kill it, or maybe we hadn't even finished it, and they're like, no, that'll just generate even more interest in what we do. So,
Yeah. Well, and it did, I think, because they came out at the same. Well, at least for
the
me.
book and movie came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
My movie, if it's done, probably still won't be out for a year or two.
Right. Well, so the book actually made me like the Tarantino movie a little less
Really?
when I saw it, because I saw the Tarantino movie and I'm like, wait a second, there's a lot here that isn't right. But but I, if you
Well, you
watched
were the one that ruined that for me, because
did I ruin that for you?
we're not really. I mean, not intentionally. We were at Angus, something for Angus at his high school, lacrosse or something.
Oh, we were at his lacrosse. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, some kind of ceremony, and you were
Yeah.
back from DC, and you told me, because the movie wasn't out wasn't going to be out for another 3 or 4 months, and you said, I'll bet you he does the same thing he did in Inglourious Bastards.
I did say that, and then
I'd never seen that movie, and I didn't. He changed history and had Hitler getting killed by a bunch of commandos.
Yeah.
And when you told me that, I'm like, oh, Tarantino would never do something like that with this case. And you called it, so that's back of my head. And then by the time I refused to read anything. I didn't get to see it till a couple days after it came out.
Yeah.
Was watching it, I kept thinking of, and I wouldn't go see Inglourious Bastards. I still have never seen it.
Really?
I know. A lot of people like it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I didn't think there was any way he was going to show that.
And I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, I didn't know that people would change something that dramatically in such recent history, like history from the last 100 years.
Yeah. Well, usually it's not. I think that's just kind of Tarantino's.
But then when he did it in that movie and you told me about it, I thought, well, he's not going to do it twice, because then it's going to look like the guy has no imagination. If he takes a famous, historic, horrible person, Manson and the group, like Hitler, and does the exact same thing at the end, then, that doesn't sound, inventive.
I could talk for an hour about how I don't think Quentin Tarantino is very inventive, but that's
okay.
that's a different podcast.
Right.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long. Is there anything I missed that is? I mean, obviously the contents of the book we could talk for hours about.
Yeah,
You know,
No, get your friends or whoever to buy the book, and then I'll come back on after they've read it and answer any questions.
Okay, deal.
And you'll have to ask me questions about Villanova University basketball.
When was the last time Villanova won a national championship?
3 years ago.
Very well. Very nice.
And I mean, Arkansas is like
oh, come on now.
Like a swampy suburb compared to the powerhouse of Villanova basketball. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's Villanova's football team called?
The Wildcats.
Well, yeah,
we're not football for it's too dangerous. Villanova's we want to protect our brain.
Right. Yeah.
So we don't encourage football. We encourage basketball, which you're not going to get concussions.
I thought you went to NYU. Why are you saying we?
Because I grew up basically on a street that was right along the campus of Villanova, and when I was a kid, I was a shoe shine boy when I was like 8 or 9, and I used to go up there to the practices and back then the basketball players in the 60s wore shoes when they arrived for practice, and I shoes, get their autographs.
Wow.
And I had season tickets to the home games until I was about 15.
You've had a lot of interesting jobs.
Yeah. Those are the ones that were legal.
Well,
the other ones where you can ask your father, he'll know those.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Well, Tom, I really appreciate it. Guys, his book is available for paperback June 23rd, Amazon. The hardcover and audiobook is out now. Go check it out. You can follow him on Instagram at Chaos Book. Tom, thanks so much. I really
Thanks for having me, Beau. That was fun.
This was fun.